In the early hours of November 13, 2022, a quiet college town in Moscow, Idaho became the center of one of the most shocking and talked about murder cases in recent American history, a case that would grip the nation, dominate headlines, and spark endless speculation across social media and Reddit communities. For University of Idaho students, 21-year-old Kaylee Goncalves, 21-year-old Madison Mogen, 20-year-old Xana Kernodle, and 20-year-old Ethan Chapin, were brutally stabbed to death in their off-campus rental house on King Road, just steps away from the university campus. What made the case even more chilling was not just the sheer brutality of the crime, but the fact that it happened in a neighborhood filled with students, with two roommates asleep in the same house who survived unharmed, and no clear motive in sight. To truly understand how the investigation unfolded, it's important to know who these victims were. Kaylee Goncalves was a bright, ambitious young woman who had recently adopted a dog named Murphy and was preparing to move out of the house to start a new chapter in her life. Her best friend Madison Mogen, often called Maddie, was like a sister to her. The two had grown up together in Idaho and remained inseparable, sharing not only memories but also dreams for the future. Xana Kernodle was described as fun-loving, caring, and someone who lit up every room she entered, and at the time she was in a relationship with Ethan Chapin, a triplet who came from a close-knit family and was known for his kindness and athleticism. That night, November 12th into the 13th, the victims had gone about what seemed to be a typical Saturday night for college students. Kaylee and Madison spent the evening at a bar called the Corner Club before heading to a local food truck around 1:40 a.m., a moment that was caught on a Twitch livestream which later became an important timeline marker. Meanwhile, Xana and Ethan attended a party at the Sigma Chi fraternity house before returning home around 1:45 a.m. By 2 a.m., all four were back inside the King Road house, a three-story residence with multiple bedrooms and a history of being a lively student rental. Two other roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, were also home that night, but they lived on the lower floors and survived the attack. The murders are believed to have taken place sometime between 4 o'clock and 4:25 a.m. According to police affidavits, one of the surviving roommates, Dylan, reported that she heard noises during those early morning hours. At first she thought it sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog, but then she recalled hearing what she thought was crying from Xana's room. When she opened her door, she reported seeing a figure dressed in black with bushy eyebrows and a mask covering his mouth and nose walking toward her before leaving through the sliding glass door. Shocked and frozen in fear, she locked herself in her room and did not call 911 until later that morning. At 11:58 a.m., a call was finally made to emergency services from one of the surviving roommates' phones, reporting an unconscious person. When officers arrived, they were met with a gruesome scene that was unlike anything the small police department of Moscow, Idaho had ever encountered. The coroner later confirmed that the four victims had been stabbed multiple times with a large fixed-blade knife, possibly a K-bar-style weapon, and some showed defensive wounds, indicating they had tried to fight back. The crime scene was bloody and chaotic, yet oddly, no signs of forced entry were found, and nothing seemed stolen, leaving investigators baffled about the motive. News of the murders spread rapidly, and fear gripped the campus and community. Students fled home, parents pulled their children from classes, and many accused the police of withholding information. As in the first weeks, law enforcement appeared tight-lipped and gave confusing statements, initially saying the attack was targeted but refusing to clarify what that meant. Meanwhile, online communities, especially Reddit, exploded with speculation. Theories ranged from a jealous lover to a stalker targeting one of the girls, to random drifters, and even to elaborate conspiracies involving multiple killers. The pressure on Moscow police was immense, but behind the scenes, a massive investigation was underway, with help from the FBI and Idaho State Police. They collected over 20,000 tips, interviewed more than 300 people, and scoured hours of surveillance footage from around town. A key breakthrough came when investigators reviewed surveillance video from a nearby neighborhood and identified a white Hyundai Elantra driving repeatedly past the King Road residence around the time of the murders. The vehicle was seen circling the area multiple times between 3:29 and 4:20 a.m., and then fleeing the neighborhood at high speed shortly after 4:25 a.m. This was the first concrete lead, and police issued a nationwide alert asking the public for help identifying the owner of a white Hyundai Elantra model year 2011 to 2013. As investigators pieced the puzzle together, their attention eventually turned to Bryan Christopher Kohberger, a 28-year-old PhD criminology student at Washington State University, just across the state line in Pullman, Washington. Kohberger lived only about 10 miles from Moscow and drove a white 2015 Hyundai Elantra, a newer model but still consistent with the description. What made the discovery even more chilling was Kohberger's academic background. He was studying criminal justice and criminology, and had a keen interest in the psychology of crime. In fact, he had even posted online surveys seeking input from criminals about how they chose their victims and how they felt during the commission of crimes. To many, it seemed almost as though he had been preparing for something like this all along. Investigators dug deeper and found that Kohberger's phone had pinged cell towers near the King Road house multiple times in the months leading up to the murders, suggesting he may have been surveilling the residence. Most damning of all was the DNA evidence. At the crime scene, a knife sheath was recovered next to Madison and Kaylee's bodies. On the button snap of the sheath, investigators found a male DNA profile. When they compared it to DNA taken from trash outside Kohberger's family home in Pennsylvania, where he had returned for winter break, it was a match to Bryan Kohberger. On December 30, 2022, police and FBI agents arrested Bryan Kohberger at his parents' house in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania in a dramatic early morning raid. He was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. The arrest was a relief to the community but also raised new questions. Why had he done it? What was the motive? And how could someone with his background in criminology think he would get away with such a heinous act? Following his arrest, Kohberger waived extradition and was quickly brought back to Idaho to face charges. In his first court appearance, he stood stone-faced, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, and spoke only briefly to confirm he understood the charges. Prosecutors announced they would pursue the death penalty if he was convicted, a decision that further heightened the case's intensity. In the months that followed, the legal proceedings moved slowly, with defense attorneys filing motions to dismiss or suppress evidence, and the court sealing many documents to preserve the integrity of the trial. The gag order placed on attorneys and police meant that official updates were scarce, fueling even more online speculation. Meanwhile, the families of the victims attended hearings, demanding justice and struggling with grief. Kaylee's father, in particular, became a vocal figure in the media, criticizing delays and pushing for transparency. By early 2023, the case was one of the most discussed topics on true crime subreddits, with thousands of posts analyzing every detail, from Bryan Kohberger's demeanor and weight loss, to his alleged social awkwardness, to his background as a teaching assistant where students described him as harsh and arrogant. Many debated whether he had chosen his victims at random or whether there was some prior connection, though investigators have never confirmed a direct link between Kohberger and the victims. Others scrutinized the surviving roommate's actions, wondering why Dylan waited until nearly noon to call 911 after seeing a masked intruder, though experts pointed out that trauma and fear can cause people to freeze in shocking situations. What is clear is that the case highlighted not only the horror of violent crime but also the power of digital sleuthing and public obsession with true crime cases in the age of social media. As the case moved forward in 2023 and into 2024, the courtroom became the stage where every detail of the University of Idaho murders would be dissected, and the legal proceedings against Bryan Kohberger began to attract as much media attention as the crime itself. Kohberger was formally indicted by a grand jury in May 2023 on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. Prosecutors immediately signaled their intent to pursue the death penalty, citing the heinous, atrocious, and cruel nature of the crime. In pre-trial hearings, his defense team argued that much of the evidence was circumstantial, questioning the reliability of cell phone pings and video surveillance, and seeking to suppress the DNA evidence by challenging the methods investigators used to match his profile through familial DNA. Despite these motions, the judge ruled that the evidence would stand, noting the overwhelming consistency of the state's case, which included DNA from the knife sheath, surveillance of his vehicle, and digital records showing his phone traveling near the King Road residence at key times before and after the murders. Throughout these hearings, the families of the victims attended regularly, their grief and frustration visible. Kaylee's parents often gave interviews outside the courthouse, demanding swift justice and expressing their anguish at the delays. The Goncalves family in particular became a public voice, challenging the secrecy imposed by the gag order, while the Chapin and Kernodle families sought a quieter approach, focusing on remembering their loved ones rather than the legal back and forth. Every court date drew national media outlets, and outside, the sidewalks of Moscow filled with reporters and true crime enthusiasts. Online, Reddit threads chronicled every filing, every new piece of evidence, and every hint of Kohberger's demeanor inside the courtroom. Analysts debated whether he would ultimately go to trial or seek a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, and comparisons were frequently made to past high-profile cases like Ted Bundy, given Kohberger's criminology background and his apparent fascination with criminal psychology. One of the most heavily scrutinized aspects of the case was Kohberger's digital footprint. Prosecutors revealed that his phone data showed him near the King Road house on at least 12 occasions in the months before the murders, usually late at night or early in the morning, suggesting surveillance or stalking behavior. On the night of the murders, his phone was turned off between 2:47 a.m. and 4:48 a.m., the exact window of the killings, only to reappear as he traveled back toward Pullman. His car, the white Hyundai Elantra, was also captured on multiple surveillance cameras circling the King Road neighborhood. Combined with the DNA on the knife sheath, this evidence created a compelling narrative for the prosecution. In response, the defense argued that the presence of touch DNA could be explained by transfer, that surveillance videos were grainy and inconclusive, and that cell phone data was not precise enough to place him directly at the crime scene. Still, to the public and the media, the case seemed damning, and speculation continued about why someone like Kohberger, with no known direct ties to the victims, would commit such a brutal crime. By late 2024, the case reached a turning point. Reports surfaced that Kohberger was considering a plea agreement to avoid the death penalty. In early 2025, he officially accepted a deal. In exchange for pleading guilty to the murders, prosecutors agreed to remove capital punishment from the table, sentencing him instead to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some family members expressed relief that they would not have to endure a long and painful trial, while others, particularly Kaylee's father, voiced disappointment that Kohberger would not face the ultimate punishment for his crimes. The plea deal closed the door on a trial that might have dragged on for years, but it left many questions unanswered, especially about motive. Why did Kohberger choose that house, that night, and those particular victims? Was it a crime of opportunity, a twisted experiment by a criminology student eager to test theories, or something far more personal? To this day, authorities have not released a definitive explanation, leaving room for continued speculation. The media frenzy surrounding the case also highlighted the darker side of public obsession with true crime. From the moment news broke of the murders, online communities on Reddit, TikTok, and YouTube exploded with theories, some of which unfairly targeted innocent people. Local businesses, neighbors, and even the surviving roommates were subjected to wild speculation, forcing police to issue warnings against online harassment. The story became a cultural phenomenon, not just because of the tragedy itself, but because of the way it reflected modern society's fixation with crime, justice, and the mysteries of human behavior. Documentaries and podcasts were produced even before the trial began, each offering theories and interviews, while the families of the victims struggled with the glare of constant media attention. For them, the focus remained on remembering the lives lost, Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan, rather than the man who took them away. Looking back now, the University of Idaho murders stand as one of the most significant crime stories of the decade, a chilling reminder of how evil can lurk even in the most ordinary settings. Bryan Kohberger, a man who once studied the psychology of criminals, now spends his days behind bars, his own life confined to the very system he once sought to understand. The case continues to echo in classrooms, on college campuses, and across the internet, raising questions about safety, justice, and the blurred line between fascination and exploitation when it comes to true crime. For the people of Moscow, Idaho, the tragedy has forever changed their small community, leaving behind scars that time alone cannot heal. And for the families, justice, while delivered in the form of a life sentence, can never truly replace the lives and futures stolen on that November night. This is the story of the University of Idaho murders, a story of 4 young lives cut short, of a community shaken to its core, of an investigation that spanned states and captured a nation's attention, and of a trial that may have ended, but will be remembered for decades as a symbol of both justice and the haunting mysteries that linger in its wake.